Hey everyone, it's Irene Lyon here, and welcome to this entire world of nervous system health and healing. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching and listening and learning. I want to make sure of one thing, and that is that you at some point visit my site. I want to just mention that because a lot of times we have folks here in the comments wondering how they can continue working with me, if they can find other resources. And really the answer to those things would be yes and yes. I have classes, courses, online offerings that are free and paid so that you can learn how to become your own medicine and also just learn more about your nervous system and what it is and why it's important. We recently popped up a new Here page on my site, and people have been loving it because it's just a little bit of an educational journey on why it is so important to heal at this nervous system level and get regulated at this nervous system level. And speaking of regulation, a question that someone asked a little while ago was something along the lines of, and I'm paraphrasing, Irene, can you do a video on what it would look like for someone who has regulation in their system to process a traumatic event? And just recently, in one of my training calls for my 12-week program, Smart Body, Smart Mind, I was teaching a call on what I call somatic first aid. So how to be with ourselves when we encounter a stressful situation, an accident, an injury, really not the steps, but how we want to approach such a thing. And it just so happened that when I was teaching this lecture to my folks, the night before, I slammed my hand in a door just off of our balcony. I was barbecuing and I went to come inside, and it might have been that the wind was a bit high at night, and I know the weight of the door and the speed that the door closes, but for whatever reason, it caught my hand. I broke some skin and it hurt really, really badly. And I'm going to use this example as a way to teach you and to give you some ideas around what to do. So we would say that processing something like this with regulation would mean that we really feel it in our bodies. We don't pretend it didn't happen. We don't keep doing what we're doing. So in this case, it hurt. I broke skin. My finger started to bleed, and my hand was throbbing, specifically my middle finger and my index finger. And rather than rush and continue to cook and do what I was doing, I just sat on our couch and I just felt the pain. I felt the pain. I felt the hand. I made sure that the blood wasn't dripping anywhere and it was okay. And I just sat there and I waited and I waited, and I maybe waited for, it was really only maybe 5 minutes, maybe under 5 minutes. It was so minor that I didn't really need a Band-Aid. And then I got up and I kept going about my day. The next day, other than this little cut that I had, because I still have it actually, there was no pain, like nothing at all. And what I want to really convey is how important it is when something acute like this occurs, in this case, what happened to me, if you can, to pause, sense, feel, be with it. If there's any emotion, let that through. Now, my system, I'm quite certain, is fairly regulated. I'm not perfect, but I have a lot of capacity. So in this moment, I didn't feel embarrassed. There was no shame. There was no emotion at all. It was just physical pain. And then I went on with my day, my night, and so much so that I really did forget about it. And that is not me dissociating from it. It's me just processing that minor injury. So that would be one example, short example, of how having more regulation would lead one to process a little bit of an acute injury like this. Now, what is important to understand is, let's look at a different scenario. Let's say my system isn't regulated. There might be 2 to 3 ways a person might address this. One, it happens and they ignore it. It's that classic walking down the street and you trip and you're so embarrassed and you pretend that it didn't happen. You just keep walking, but you're like in so much pain, but you just push through. This would be a very, very human way of overriding the situation, overriding, ignoring, masking the discomfort, masking the pain, all these sorts of things. So that might be one way that somebody would move forward in their evening when they slam their hand in a door. Another situation might be that this occurs and they break down in emotion of tears and grief, and it's just so intense, and it feels even more than it is because for whatever reason the emotion just floods in. Now, of course, there can be a million reasons for this, but one thing that I often teach my students is if you have never stopped to feel pain in an acute event like this, and then you start doing this work. So this is now for those people who are maybe just starting this work and you're starting to connect your somatic experience, you're connecting to your survival stressors, you're connecting to the environment and the reality of maybe what just happened. And again, this was a very minor thing for me, totally fine. And even if it's minor for another person and they're just starting out this work, it might feel like war just broke out in their body. But it didn't. But the magnitude of feeling it is so much more heightened and sensitized because their system has years, if not decades, of trapped survival stress. We might call these little traumas or all sorts of traumas that they've never worked with, that it's stuck inside. And so this little opening where they finally stop to feel the pain is just out of this world. And so someone whom is working towards gaining more regulation and are consciously working with it, maybe with me or with another practitioner, they might go, this is ridiculous. There's no way that this tiny little injury would create me on the floor crying and wailing as if I had just, lost my parent or something else, right? Or like a massive bone break. So oddly, if you are beginning this work and you're finding that you're having these overreactions, that's possibly a good sign because it shows you're sensing things, you're feeling things, but the connection to it is a little off the charts. Trust me when I say it starts to level back in. The pendulum swing comes more into the middle, and what you feel becomes more accurate given the injury, the insult, the trauma, etc. Now, another example that might happen, and I use this example in when I was teaching the other day, is you slam your hand in the door and there is a flood of intense anger, maybe shame, maybe I'm such an idiot, I'm a loser, how could I have done that? The thoughts start coming in, but also the bubbling of big emotion and rage. And this might be where someone goes back to the door and hits it or kicks it or does something in their home that is expressive of, we could say, being violent. Now, of course, the door hit the hand, it hurt the hand, but that is also an overreaction when something is quite minor. Let's just say, and this falls into someone who is maybe not aware of their physiology, they're not aware of all the trapped traumas and survival stresses in their system. And we see this in violence, folks who grew up in violent households. Typically the parents aren't wanting to hurt their children. They really aren't, but they can't control the explosions. They can't control the violence. They don't know how to be with the sensation. It's just over the top. And usually that's because they did not have good upbringings when they were young. And so it just passes on. So in this instance, again, if someone has the awareness to notice, why am I feeling deep, deep shame for just getting a little cut and a little bang on my hand? Why do I want to take that glass door, in this case my door was glass, and bash it with a baseball bat? This doesn't make any sense. That would be a clue that there's some pretty serious dysregulation going on in the system. It doesn't match up for the accident injury at hand, literally, pun intended. So in such a case, again, granted that person is interested in learning, that's where we would say, okay, where are these big outbursts coming from? And in those moments, that might be if that person, again, hypothetically, were to sit and feel, process, there might be some memories that come up of being hit. You know, how many kids when they were little, this is like my parents' generation, and even some in my generation, we were hit with things at school. Kids were hit with rulers. Rulers were broken over their heads. Crazy stuff that we just hope doesn't occur anymore in schools, but I'm sure in some places it does. But this violence where we're being abused, essentially. That little person can't fight back, and normally they can't. They're going to store that insult to their system. And then they get a hit on the hand. Of course, it's from an inanimate object. It's not from a person, but it sparks up the physicality, the memory, the emotions, the sensations, the feelings of shame, the feelings of just being hurt and hit and abused. And so it blows up. And that is another way that we can know, okay, there's something to work with. So to go back to the question, which is how does someone with regulation process a traumatic event? It is you're processing it in the moment with the sensations, and you're not attaching to old narrative, old story. You're not making up some meaning like the universe must hate me because I've just slammed my hand in the door. It must be the astrological signs that are out of whack, Mercury's in retrograde, whatever it might be. No. When we are fully regulated and embodied and connected to the here and now, we process these things in the moment with the physical sensation. And in cases like this, there's really not a lot of emotion at all. Now, of course, I could take 10 other examples to give you to demonstrate how someone with regulation might process all sorts of things, but I think I'll leave it at that for now and use just this one example of a physical impact that really was sore and hurt, or it hurt at the time, but then it healed. It really did recover. Now, one thing I will say, what often occurs when we have something like this occur and we just keep pushing and going on, our system gets a little disconnected. It dissociates a bit. It numbs a little bit. I've talked about functional freeze in other videos. I'll be sure to post and link near here my functional freeze video. That will explain this a bit more with a few different scenarios around childhood. So be sure to check that one out. Because these ways in which we freeze and shut down and ignore our pain are often embedded in us very young in life. And so there's something quite powerful and very medicinal, if I use that term, by moving forward from this day forward with our body, with our sensation, when we get a little hurt like this and it's not life-threatening, to really pause, sit, feel, and just feel the sensation for what it is. And watch if the mind starts to make up stories about why this is happening. If that's occurring, then we know we've got some work to do. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope this has been useful. I hope you can put some practices, some ideas into your world, into your repertoire of just being here on this planet. We're always going to have these little things happen to us, and when they do happen, let that be an opportunity to really work with your body, work with your sensations, and see what might be activating you that doesn't make sense, because that is a cue that there might be something to work with. And again, make sure you head to my site and check out all that is there, especially that new Here page, so you can get a little more education and information around this entire world of nervous system health and healing. Take good care, and bye for now.